It's the inspiration for the Flash movie and it kicked off DC's New 52, but if we're honest about it, was the Flashpoint event really that good? Woof woof! Hey guys, it's me Marcus aka the Mad Dog and we're back with another video. Written by Geoff and illustrated by Andy Kubert, the first issue of Flashpoint was published by DC Comics in July of 2011, with the fifth and final issue being released in October of the same year. In the world Barry Allen knew is no more. War wages between Atlantis and the Amazons, Batman kills first and asks questions later, and the fate of reality rests solely on the Flash. But is the damage done by the Reverse Flash too much to correct? And despite its flaws, what if this new world can give Barry everything that he ever wanted? I'm gonna do things a little bit differently for this review because Flashpoint is something that I've always held with quite high esteem. So for this review, rather than just reading the main series, I made sure that I read at least the first issue of every single tie-in as well. And that also includes the build-up, which I do feel is mostly skippable. Don't get me wrong, I enjoyed the couple of issues of the main Flash series, but it didn't really do much to hype me up for Flashpoint. It just kept referencing a time anomaly, which again is a fun story for the Flash series. But despite being entertained, I feel I would have been as prepared for Flashpoint if these issues just weren't included. The real highlight of the build-up is the phenomenal Reverse Flash one-shot. At first I thought this might have been another skippable issue, and again I feel like if you do miss this one, you're not going to be unprepared for the main event, for a reason that I'm going to get into a little bit later in this video. But I really enjoyed this one and I'd fully recommend checking it out before you do read Flashpoint. Again, not because it's essential, but just because it's so entertaining. I knew the Reverse Flash was twisted, but this gave context as to why, and the levels of obsession that he can reach, and the reason why he's got so much disdain for the Flash. It was one of the highlights of this book for me, and it honestly did more to get me hyped for Flashpoint than the issues of Flash that were labelled Road to Flashpoint. But let's be honest, we're not here to talk about the Prelude, it's all about the main event, and honestly, despite the fact that Flashpoint was that event for me when I was growing up, this wasn't how I remembered it. Time always tells the full story and we can get caught up in the hype as something's being released or the promise of what it's going to bring. And I don't want to be one of those channels that's so stuck in the ways that if I say I liked something once, I'm just going to stick to my guns even if I don't believe it anymore. It's like whenever I talk about a Silver Age book and I say the dialogue's too corny and it just doesn't work for a modern reader, you get people who are so up in arms about it. But I can guarantee if they read that now, it'd mostly be for the nostalgia. I don't want to be that guy, and that's why I'm not afraid of telling you that whilst I was reading Flashpoint, I got the feeling that it's more remembered for kicking off the New 52 more so than it is the story itself. Don't get me wrong, I still enjoyed reading this, especially when some of those tie-ins connected to the main story and it did feel like this massive world, but it just wasn't as exciting as I remembered it. And something I found myself doing often in this reading was comparing it to House of M, which is something that I reviewed for last year's season of events. But because I enjoyed that Marvel event so much and it's still fresh in my memory, I think that might be a reason why I wasn't so in love with Flashpoint this time. They're both about the timeline being altered so that the world that our main character knew is now different, but they've got knowledge of what it used to be and they want to return things back to normal, so they assemble a team of characters that they knew in the real world but are now a bit different, and they're going up against a threat that they always considered to be a friend. And there's also a massive universe spanning impact at the end. Sure, that may be an oversimplification, but I just couldn't unsee it. And at the time this was originally coming out, I didn't know what the New 52 would mean to me. I was just going along with the ride, picking up every tie-in and enjoying going to my local comic shop every week, so I didn't really think much about it. But now that I'm older, it might be time for me to put on my tinfoil hat. So hear me out on this one, but I get the feeling that Flashpoint wasn't intended to kick off the New 52 until quite late on in its development. Sure, the Flash is always at the centre of the DC universe changing, but ironically, this event feels really rushed. How often is a big universe changing story only 5 issues long? And then when you dive into it a bit further and you look into each issue individually, there's a setup one, there's a few in the middle that centre around a sole task, and then the last issue is just a massive battle. I can't put my finger on exactly what the plot would have been, but it does feel like there was supposed to be a slow build, which is why issues 2, 3 and 4 mostly just have one objective. But then somewhere around issue 4, it feels like John's learned that he must have had less time than he intended, and he just rushes to get to the final conclusion. And honestly, if you don't read some of those tie-ins, some of the storyline can feel quite confusing, and suddenly characters will appear out of nowhere and just be involved in the story, and it feels like maybe they were supposed to be given a bit more time beforehand. And again, it makes me think that originally this might have been intended to just be in a Flash-focused event, similar to how Blackest Night was with Green Lantern, but then DC knew that they wanted to relaunch everything with the New 52, so all of a sudden this had to be the springboard for it, and also the cause of it. Like, if you think I'm crazy, that's okay, but go back and read this event and try and pretend that you don't know that it's going to start the New 52, and see if it feels like a universe change is a natural conclusion for this story. Like, I may not have enjoyed it as much, but Crisis on Infinite Earths felt like that was the intention from the beginning, whereas with Flashpoint, I just didn't get that vibe. And yeah, that might seem like a really weird complaint considering that I did enjoy Flashpoint and I do enjoy the New 52, but I just can't help but feel like there's no cohesion between those two things happening, and I do wonder that if there was a different story, what would it have been? But looking at what we've got here, rather than what I think was going on behind the scenes, I have to give a massive amount of praise to the Andy Kubert art. Yeah, I'm not doing a full-blown art section like I do in most of my reviews, but he still deserves a lot of credit. It's clean but still detailed, cities feel alive without feeling over-designed or taking focus away from the characters, action has weight and pace, reactions feel authentic, and there are a few scenes where I felt like Ivan Rice took over, which is a compliment in itself. But the one thing that bugged me with Kubert's style is that he kept doing action lines that just felt way too cartoony. It could be Cyborg pressing a button or Barry pushed into a wall, but they were just really obvious and they didn't complement the rest of the image, and they lacked that subtlety that I expected from a level of art that's consistently high throughout. And that type of thing is like sound design in a movie, that if I start to notice it, it's probably not for a good reason. Yet the character designs were still great, and the paneling took risks to make it feel dynamic, and there's not really too much else that I can criticise about this style. It makes me understand why some people bought both the Omnibus and the Absolute Edition, and if you want to pick up either of those, you can get them with the discount codes that we've got with the channel sponsor, Organic Price Books. They've got great packaging, fast shipping, and amazing customer services, and if you use code WOOFWOOF, you'll get $2 off your order. And if you're ordering 3 or more books and you want them to be delivered together, make sure you use code WOOFWOOF, ship it together for 5% off your entire order. Don't worry, you can just copy and paste them from the description down below, and you can use these codes as many times as you like. Let's look a little bit more at the bigger picture, and I think the one thing that really elevates this event is just the lore that exists behind this world. And admittedly, if it wasn't for the tie-ins, a lot of that would have felt like wasted potential. Again, it ties in a bit to what I'm saying there. I don't feel like the main series got to explore as much as it wanted to, but that's helped by the fact that a lot of these factors felt really natural and that they didn't need much explanation. And to a certain extent, it's surprising that some of these things hadn't happened in the main DC universe. And yeah, of course, I'm talking about the war between the Amazonians and the Atlanteans. And I loved how this conflict had been going on for a while, that you were just thrown into the middle of it. It made this feel like a world that existed before the Flash arrived there. And as much as I'm saying that I wish it would have been explored more in the main series, I loved how the tie-ins gave us that context. You did get to see unravel, you were given a reason why, so that it did feel like it made more sense. And normally that's something that I often criticise. If I'm given too much of an explanation, it normally makes me feel like it's trying to prove something. And for some reason, I'm not sure if it's just because the tie-ins were only 3 issues each, so it didn't feel like it went on for too long, but Flashpoint just really managed to nail this element. Now, it should go without saying that not all tie-ins within an event are created equally. And what I really liked is that Flashpoint is unique in the sense that it wasn't just derailing every ongoing series that was coming out at the time. Instead, each tie-in is its own unique series. Because how annoying is it when you're reading something and you're enjoying it, like for example Donny Cates' Venom, and you really enjoyed all the issues that came out before it, but then it has to pause itself so that you can do some really weak tie-in with something like War of the Realms. Yet Flashpoint is unique in the sense that there's a tie-in that's even better than the main event. Yep, I'm talking about Batman Night of Vengeance. Honestly, this 3-issue miniseries is too good to just be labelled as a tie-in. Legit, if you miss Elseworld books, just give this a chance. It's a great example of an event tie-in because it stands on its own and you don't even need the main event to be able to enjoy this. And honestly, for me, this is one of the highlights of Flashpoint. Another huge standout is Frankenstein, and I made a point of not checking the glossary and seeing who the creative team was before I started one of these series, and I was pleasantly surprised at the end to find out that it was still Geoff Lemire that was working on this, because I loved what he did with the character in the New 52, which is something that I've spoken about in other videos, and it's just great to see that those foundations were started here. I do wish this miniseries would have felt more integral to the overall Flashpoint story, but I guess all the tie-ins could be split into 2 categories because you've got essential and then just universe building, and yeah, sometimes it can be both. And honestly, I think I found myself enjoying more the universe building stories than I did the essential titles. Don't get me wrong, it wasn't bad, but I don't think I would have read all of the Aquaman series if it wasn't for my interest in the war. There was a lot of monologue, narration, and I just felt like the Wonder Woman series did a better job of getting to the point. Also, it might not have felt as integral as I'd hoped, but the Lois Lane book wins the award for most surprising read of this event, which is an award that I literally just created. And I'm glad I gave each mini-series a try, or else otherwise I probably would have skipped this. Deadman and the Flying Graysons was another one that really surprised me, and again, it wasn't fundamental to the main event. Instead, it gave us a sense of what it must have been like to be an average person just travelling across this new Europe, with Rome gone, which is something that offended me personally because I've been on very few holidays in my life, but that was one of them, and it just let us look at the fallout within this world without it needing to be connected to the main series. Also, by the way, little secret between you and me, if you're in Europe and you want to buy some books with free shipping and great packaging, check out Comics Bugle. There's a link in the description. The Booster Gold issues were fun too, and like I said, they were the only ones that were connected to another ongoing series. I just love his character, and also this felt like a 90s title. From the art to Doomsday, and again, it didn't just throw Booster into the Flashpoint storyline for the sake of it, and honestly, it was just really fun. There were some tie-ins that I definitely skipped, but this felt like a really nice palate cleanser between Flashpoint issues. But like I said, some of the tie-ins that I thought were going to be fundamental, I ended up skipping. There was a Superman book, I skipped Citizen Cold after issue 2, and I'm not sure if it's just me, but Kid Flash Lost felt like it could have been a great book, but then it did the dumb thing of referencing Back to the Future and then pretty much just copying the plot. And also, why did every character in this book have a chin like Leafy? So it's a bit of a double-edged sword, because I feel like if you read Flashpoint without any of the tie-ins, you're really going to be selling the experience short. But knowing which tie-ins you should read to enhance your experience and not make it feel bloated is important as well. What I would recommend is reading a couple of pages of each one and seeing if it works for you. And I'm recommending that approach because I really enjoyed a lot of the characters within Flashpoint. Of course, Batman is a standout, and if you don't know the twist revolving around him, I'm going to shy away from it for now, but seeing how he was more brutal from Bruce Wayne and how his morality wasn't the same either, but the core of the character was still consistent when he was helping out the Flash, I loved this, and they put a lot of hope into this character working, and I'm just really glad they did. Cyborg was great in this too, and I really wish he would have been given his own standalone tie-in, especially when you consider some of the other characters that got them. And despite him pretty much being Superman level in terms of status, I like how he mostly remained the same. Because in a world where villains are heroes and vice versa, it was nice just having some kind of consistency, and it made this world feel a bit more relatable. And those differences they did opt for, such as not having a Justice League and Superman not being in the picture, I really enjoyed because I felt like it gave it a different kind of conflict at the beginning of the book. If they would have had a few more issues in the main event, I would have really enjoyed seeing how they come up with alternatives to get around these problems, but the solution just often seems to be, let's do the thing that's missing in the first place. For example, the problem is, we don't have a Superman, so what do you think they do? Yep, they just try and find out where Superman is. Oh well, another problem is that we don't have a Justice League, so the solution is, well, let's just form a Justice League. Kinda takes the intrigue out of having that problem if you just come up with the same solution. Also, I just felt like this event really let Barry down. He's the focal point of this entire thing and a great character who's integral to the history of the DC universe. But the majority of his role just ends up being a facilitator to get people from point A to point B. As well, he was just really weak in this, like they just completely nerfed him. I get they didn't have his powers from the start, but I'm gonna have to spoil something here, but I'll put timestamps in the description so that you don't get anything ruined. The Flash restores everything by just running really quickly. There's more science involved in it, and they do try to give an explanation, but if you told me before I'd ever read this book how I think the Flash will solve a problem, I would put all my money, which admittedly isn't much to begin with, on him solving a problem by just running really quickly. So why didn't he do that earlier? Yeah, they spoke about paradoxes and timeline disruptions and anomalies, but admittedly that's just all MacGuffins to me. And it's just really disappointing that this world-altering event is solved in the exact way that I could have predicted from the beginning. In a way, Barry is so underutilized in this that it pretty much just becomes another Batman event. What I did like though is that they didn't just make this a world that took everything away from him. The moments that he got to share with his mum were really sweet, and I wouldn't really blame him if he wanted to stay in this universe. Like, sometimes you have to give the hero something. It can't all just be dystopia, else they'd have no reason to continue existing there. Speaking of which, I wanted more Reverse Flash in this. Especially after his one-shot, I was more than ready for an event that centered around him just tormenting Barry and always being one step ahead of him, but he doesn't really appear until the last issue so that you can laugh at him a bit. Sure, there is a really great final battle between these two, which does redeem a lot of the action and also feel like a culmination of their story arc, but I expected the Reverse Flash to be in this way more. Like, how are you pretty much responsible for the universe changing and then you don't really come and gloat about it? If that was me with my mortal enemy, I'd be there every second of the rest of his life just to remind him. Wait, don't tell me I'm more evil than Reverse Flash. And okay, I'll be the first to admit that I haven't done a great job of avoiding every spoiler in this review, but I'll try and be vague here, but there is a really nice epilogue scene. It's a moment with Barry and the Batman we know, and I just really like when a book gives us a moment to explore their humanity. You don't often get to see these personal one-on-one moments in some of these bigger events, so I really like that Flashpoint had that. And it kind of solidifies what I said earlier, that this mostly feels like a Batman event. It's just a shame that that was the only kind of aftermath that we got to see, especially with the fact that the entire universe has been restructured as a result of this. I just expected more. Why is Barry just super comfortable with this? Why isn't there an investigation from his side to check that everything is okay? Again, it just makes me think that maybe there was intended to be more at first, but everything just got cut short. Messy, I think that's the word I have to use to describe this ending. It had some great moments and it definitely wasn't a disappointing ending, and I loved that double page spread thread where you saw the DC, Wildstorm and Vertigo universes converging, but more time to explain or letting certain moments breathe and develop would have been really beneficial. Because Barry has one conversation and then it just goes, I've got to make things right. Oh no, it's my mum. Sorry, bye. I'm converging the universes. I need to run a smidge quicker. Oh great, now everything's okay again. There could have been an entire issue dedicated to the struggle and inner battle that Barry went through as he tried to correct everything. And Johnson's a great writer, so I know he could have pulled that off without it feeling like a chore. And it feels like a missed opportunity to take that chance and make sure that this is one of those events that stands above everything else that just seems to come out every year. Who knows, maybe if I would have just read the 5 issues of the event, some of these criticisms wouldn't have bothered me as much. But it's both a blessing and a curse that this omnibus is mapped correctly, because you could finish issue 2 and then you'd have to read 15 books before you got to issue 3. And in that time you did start hyping it up. It's the title of the book, so that is the one that you're going to be looking forward to the most. And then to be greeted with an issue that's mostly just a fetch quest, of course I'm going to be a bit disappointed. So it is a bit of a catch-22 because reading those tie-ins does help to flesh out this world, and it does all take place at the same time, so you're going along with that experience. But reading it in order does slow things down and make those problems more evident because of the time it takes between Flashpoint issues. And even in saying that, I did still enjoy Flashpoint overall. I just think there are a lot of issues that I noticed this time round. And who knows, maybe there is a more optimum way of reading this event that I just haven't discovered yet, because as you might already know, I'm a bit of a dumb reader. This is my final verdict. And should the success of an event be based mostly on how important it is to the timeline, or how enjoyable it is overall? That's a debate I went back and forth on whilst I was revisiting Flashpoint for the first time since I read it in 2011. On one hand, this did usher in a new polarising era for DC Comics, one that admittedly I'm very grateful for because it did help me when I was quite a new reader. But at the same time, it doesn't feel like Flashpoint was created for that purpose and was only angled in that direction at the very end, which gives it this disingenuous feeling towards how important it really is. On the flip side, there's a lot to enjoy within the event itself. It's a dense, interesting and mysterious world that only gets better with the context that's provided from some of the tie-ins. And regardless, titles like Batman Knight of Vengeance and Frankenstein are worth checking out even if you don't want to jump into Flashpoint. But in saying that, the main 5 issues of the event feel very basic in its objectives, followed by a rushed conclusion and a mostly forgotten main villain. Don't get me wrong, I'm glad I read this again, and overall I did enjoy the journey, and looking at Andy Kubert's art is always a good time, but maybe to me Flashpoint is just one of those events that was better on release than it was on reflection. I'll always have a soft spot for it, but for those who are reading it for the first time today, I can't say that it's going to have the same wow factor, and it really pains me to say that. But if I did have to sum up Flashpoint in one sentence, you should check this out if you're not reading anything else at the moment, but don't go into it expecting a masterpiece. But that's the video and the first review for the season of events. Hopefully you enjoyed it, but until next time, just make sure that you stay safe and stay mad, all you dogs. Woof woof. See you at the next video.